Tēnā koutou e te whānau. Welcome back. Welcome to session 7 of this Small Birds in the Bush workshop. We're going to start this session with 10 minutes of questions for the previous sessions, and then we're going to move on to the talks from this session. So I've got some questions here that have come in, starting with you, Graham. A question about your stode abundance measures, and you said they didn't rate as a predictor of outcomes for kaka. Question is, how bad a predictor were they, and what exactly did you do, just from the perspective of future proofing and transferability to different stoke control methods?
Well, they probably weren't that bad a predictor. It's rather that the presence or absence of a 1080 op was actually a better predictor of nesting outcomes. So, so they're an okay predictor, but of course it's more complicated than that, because it's not just the abundance of stoats that affects nesting success of kaka, it's also the abundance of possums, because we had some possum predation. So I probably need to explore in more greater detail the relationship between possum and stoat tracking rates and distances to the edge of our treatment blocks and all that kind of stuff before you could definitely write off the stoat tracking stuff. It's just really in a simple once over, I found that the 1080 op was a better predictor of nesting success.
Okay, so it was better, but not necessarily all that bad.
Yeah, no, quite.
Okay, all right, thank you. That's all we've got for you. Okay, Anne, question from Sue M. Did the birds at higher altitude start breeding later?
I tried to look at that a little bit, but it wasn't, there wasn't an obvious pattern of pretty much later breeding at high elevation. I mostly looked at kind of when we knew that chicks hatched, because at times we would find nests and they were already underway, so we wouldn't quite know exactly when the breeding started, if that makes sense. But a little bit the confounding is that potentially incubation could be slightly longer at high elevation compared to lower elevation. So in the end, I didn't fully go there, and I think maybe radio tracking would be the way to go, which obviously is a challenge with small little birds, but that would make it easier to definitely find nests right when the eggs are laid, rather than when you observe with tomtits, kind of females being called off the nest or so on, where you presume that they're already eggs being laid, but you're not quite sure how old they are.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully that answers your question there, Sue. Another one for you from Elaine Murphy. And sorry if I missed it, but how did the predators vary with altitude?
So because there was predator control across the entire site, there was no, pretty much all of them were at low levels, and so completely suppressed, so there was no variation with elevation in terms of predators, but that would be interesting to look into more as well.
Right. Okay, thanks for that. All right, there's a couple more there for you, but we'll move on and we might come back to those ones. So Doug, question for you. How do you think this experience would apply in a large ratty forest?
A large, very ratty forest.
Well, yes, I guess so. A large, very. Let's
make
it a large.
I mean, Turitea is a large, semi-ratty forest. But I guess you can get larger sites, larger and even rattier. And generally, it can depend on the species. But if we're talking about a totoi reintroduction, we'd probably predict that they'd be unlikely to persist. Having said that, there are sites where totoi hang on with pretty high rat tracking rates. So there's other stuff going on there.
Yes, yeah, that relates a bit to the next question from Neil F. How do you square these results with natural populations where robins have persisted, but rats are presumably greater than 5% a lot of the time?
Yeah, well, that comes from if you actually look at that graph that I showed of the 10 previous reintroductions, that's where our prior prediction is coming from, and it's exactly right that they do persist at higher tracking rates, and including we've done a lot of work in fragments up at Bennydale, where we had it's partly immigration driven, but we did have little populations there at sites with sort of 70–80% rat tracking rates. So there's obviously there's more going on in sites, and there's a whole bunch of issues that are going to be tidying up, like if the site is good in other ways, but also I think we know that rat tracking rates mean different things at different sites.
Mm-hmm.
So what's 20% at one site might be equivalent to 5% at another site versus 80% at another site. Now, I might be exaggerating, but hopefully you get the idea.
Mm. Yeah. Okay. Zoe, were there differences in dispersal between males and females after translocations?
No, actually, we haven't really seen any difference between the two sexes. They were kind of all quite variable in terms of some of them went straight to a territory. Like there was one pair that basically decided the release site was their territory, so they went there straight away within a day of release, and then some of them took a bit longer to kind of move around. But yeah, there wasn't really a pattern in terms of sex at all that we can find so far yet. There might be something more to do with age. We have juvenile and adults, so we're still kind of looking at that there, but yeah, not as far as we can see so far.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot. Okay then. Well, that's great. So we'll end that question and answer session there.